Привет, я Koen, and today I'm going to review the entry of Ukraine as Eurovision 2022 Kalush Orchestra with the song Stefania. Ukraine organized the national final during an already pretty insecure time for Ukraine. The big favorite to win was Alina Pash with her song Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, and another favorite was Kalush Orchestra with Stefania. Alina won the national final, but there was quite some controversy around her. She was accused of having traveled to Crimea, which is illegal in Ukraine if you don't do it through the land borders of Ukraine, and she was accused of doing that, of not traveling through the land borders, and this is not allowed. The Ukrainian law says that people who have traveled to Crimea since 2014 and not through the land borders are not allowed to represent Ukraine at Eurovision. Alina claimed that she had documents to prove that these accusations were false and that she did this according to the law, so that she had documents that proved that everything was okay, but later it turned out that those documents were falsified, that they were forged. So Alina admitted that one of the documents were potentially forged by someone of her team without her knowledge. Yet she still decided to withdraw, and she made a statement on Instagram saying, "I don't want this virtual war and hatred. The main war now is an external one, which came to my country in 2014. I don't want to be in this dirty story anymore. With a heavy heart, I withdraw my candidacy as a representative of Ukraine in the Eurovision Song Contest. Unfortunately, I'm really sorry." So instead, the runner-up Kalush Orchestra got the right to represent Ukraine at Eurovision with our song Stefania, which is not about the Greek representative of last year, but is a song that was written by Oleg Psyuk as an ode to his strong mother, Stefania. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the song has turned into a battle song. It's been heard in TikToks during protests. Sometimes Stefania even changes to Ukraina. So instead of Stefania Mamo Mamo, the lyrics get changed to Ukraina Mamo Mamo. The song mixes traditional sounds with rap and hip-hop and also uses a famous children's lullaby in the song. If you think you recognize someone from the group, you're right. Ihor Didenchuk, the flutist, who represented Ukraine last year with Shum and ended on the 5th place. It's not this guy, but he is part of the entry. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the members of Kalush Orchestra have been helping with the resistance. For example, Ihor has been weaving camouflage nets and making Molotov cocktails. The band members have also been collecting food and giving shelter to refugees, and MC Kilimin even has joined the Ukrainian armed forces. For Eurovision and the Eurovision promotion, Kalush Orchestra have been given special permission to leave Ukraine by the government, and they're also allowed to use their national final performance for their live on tape performance instead of having to record a new live on tape performance. I have to admit that my favorite of the national final was Alina Pash. I really liked Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, and I definitely think that it would have been very touching to have seen this song on Eurovision stage. She was also the only artist I knew before the national final because I really like her song Boshonkaya, but I definitely understand that she withdrew and why people wouldn't want her to represent their country when she broke the law. And next to that, I also really like Stefania by Kalush Orchestra. To me, that feels like the perfect entry to be the successor for Go Away. They're also the second song fully sung in Ukrainian that's going to be performed on the Eurovision stage. And I think it's very touching how this song has turned into a battle song for Ukraine, for all Ukrainian mothers, for people fighting, for basically every Ukrainian. And then next to that, I think that the mix between folkloristic music, rap and hip-hop are done perfectly in the song. I really like the rap, and you don't really often see rap being done that well in Eurovision. The few years you see that a bit more often, but it's still not very common, you know? So the rap sounds really good, the chorus is very memorable, and the flute part is also a really good hook. I really like that part as well. And a lot of people who have seen also really like that part of the song. This is also a song I never skip, and I also really love the cover art. And I also admire the fact that Ukraine is still participating in Eurovision, despite the fact that a war is being fought in their country. I think Kalush Orchestra is one of the many examples of how strong Ukrainians are and the Ukrainian perseverance, just how unimaginably strong everyone in Ukraine is and has to be, and I really admire and respect that. Look, right now Ukraine is on the first place of the betting odds, and everyone who I've heard talk about Eurovision this year, who isn't really in the Euro fandom, I've heard them say that Ukraine is definitely going to win this year, that they're a guaranteed winner. And even though I know there's of course a big chance that Ukraine is winning this year, I don't think they're a guaranteed winner. Look, if we're looking only at the betting odds, look at Malta last year. They were on the first place of the betting odds for a really long time, since the release of the song and up until the rehearsals, and in the end they ended up on the 7th place. So first place on the betting odds doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're going to win, because betting odds are literally what it says. It are the odds of how well a country will do based on people betting on that country. And of course, a lot of people are betting on Ukraine winning this year. It doesn't necessarily have to be accurate, especially before the rehearsals and live shows. Next to that, a war being fought in a country doesn't immediately necessarily have to mean that a country is going to win. Look at Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1993, you know, at the time of the Bosnian War. They received a big round of applause during the voting sequence, and when we could hear the spokesperson for Bosnia and Herzegovina.
We'll now go to Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Good evening, Sarajevo. May we have your votes, please? Hello, Sarajevo. We're hearing you.
But in the end, they ended up on the 16th place. Of course, this was in a time when there was no televote yet, but still, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that a country is going to win when a country is at war or a war is being fought in a country. I definitely do think that Ukraine is going to get the biggest applause this year though. Now, the fact that Ukraine has a big chance of winning this year is not just because of the war and possible sympathy votes, it's also just because the entry of Ukraine this year is a really good entry. It's a good song, it's original, it's got a beautiful message, it's even got that extra layer of emotional value for Ukrainians right now. And also, Ukraine has always been amazing at Eurovision. They're the only country to have never failed to qualify to the grand final. The Ukrainian music scene is one of the best, if not the best, music scene in the world, if you ask me. I've been listening to Ukrainian music, I think, since 2016, and I listen to Ukrainian music a lot. It's been on my Spotify Wrapped each year a lot. I listen to Ukrainian artists the most, and I think Ukraine showcases how good their music scene is really well at Eurovision. And that's also how Ukraine showcases their Ukrainian culture really well during Eurovision. So if Ukraine does indeed win this year, I better not see people say that they won only because of the war. But of course, there will be people who will be saying that if Ukraine wins. And of course, the war that's being fought in Ukraine is going to play a role. There's no way denying that. But it's definitely not the only reason why Ukraine can win this year. And about that, why would Ukraine winning this year be such a disaster? I don't get that. I think it would be beautiful if Ukraine wins this year, because it would yet again show how Europe supports Ukraine. Also, the Eurovision Song Contest was created after the Second World War because people wanted Europe to unite through music, through this competition. They wanted to come together, they wanted to celebrate peace. And now that there's such a big scale war in Europe and one country is being attacked, I think that people wanting Ukraine to win a contest like this particular contest this year, is only a logical response. Sure, it's a music competition and it's a music competition first, but like I said, Ukraine is sending a really good song. They were already a contender to win before the Russian invasion. They're sending a really good song with a beautiful message, which is original, which has this extra special emotional layer for Ukrainians and I think also for Europe. I think Ukraine is very deserving of the victory this year. I'm not saying that Ukraine should win because they're at war. I just think it would be very deserving if they would win. And sure, if they win, they probably can't host next year, but I think that's a problem for later. That's a problem that can be solved. I know there are countries that would love to host Eurovision, so I think there's no need in worrying about that. I definitely think that Ukraine is going to end up in the top 3 this year. And again, I think it's very deserving. So to conclude, I think Ukraine is once again sending a really good song to Eurovision. They know how to do Eurovision, and even in this bizarre time, I think they're doing a great job in sending a good entry to Eurovision. It's a really tragic time for Ukraine right now, and I think it's very heartbreaking to see all the damage that's being done to Ukraine, to the country. I think it's heartbreaking to see how Ukrainian artists I've been following, their Instagram feeds, for example, have turned from the most glamorous lifestyles to disastrous lifestyles, having to flee for war, to not sleeping. You see the most awful things about Ukraine. And I think that Ukraine still participating in Eurovision and still fighting so much, I think that's just so admirable. You can see that Ukrainian people are just really persevering, and I really respect that. I think Ukraine has a big chance of winning this year, and like I said, again, I think it's very deserving. I don't think they're a guaranteed winner, but I definitely definitely think that Ukraine is going to end up in the top 3. And that's about all for now. If you've seen all of my other videos this year, you've probably seen that I've linked sites in my description through which you can donate to Ukraine. You can of course also help Ukraine through other ways of helping by, for example, spreading awareness, talking about the war, educating yourself, by donating, I don't know, just by not being silent and not forgetting about the war. That's all for now for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Slava Ukraini, Gerium Slava, do popatrzenia.